Ellen White, Reconsidered, a series of presentations for people who have questions about Ellen White's writings. Today our subject will be the Food for Worms vision. Welcome to the program. I'm Pastor Kevin Morgan, and I'm answering questions about Ellen White and her writings. This one was suggested in our comments. To give some introduction, I would like for you to answer this question. What three groups of people will be on the planet when Jesus returns? Think about that as we listen to the following quotation.
I was shown the company present at the conference. Said the angel.
Some food for worms, some subjects of the 7 last plagues, some will be alive and remain upon the earth to be translated at the coming of Jesus.
Before we unpack the statement itself, I wonder if it's possible for us to misunderstand a statement spoken. In preparation for a sermon, I ran across Jesus' words in Matthew that seem to be saying one thing when they're actually saying something else. Here's the statement.
Matthew 16, verses 24 to 26.
Then said Jesus unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited, if he shall gain the whole world, and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?
Matthew 16, verses 27 and 28.
For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here, which shall not taste of death, till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
So how would you have taken Jesus' words? Some here alive to see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom? Would that not mean that Jesus' coming was within their lifetime? That would be the natural sense. But actually, chapter 16 of Matthew is the preface for Matthew chapter 17 and the Transfiguration, as Jesus comes in his kingdom symbolically represented. Jesus, those who are alive to see him when he comes, and those who are brought back from the dead, Elijah and Moses. So let's go back to Ellen White's statement and the words of the angel.
Some food for worms, some subjects of the 7 last plagues, some will be alive and remain upon the earth to be translated at the coming of Jesus.
Taken as spoken, do they not describe the three groups of people that will be upon the earth when Christ returns? What is often thought of as the food for worms vision is actually much broader in scope, and it is the two ways vision. The broader title is from the title in the testimony, the two ways. As you can see in the beginning of the testimony, the setting for this vision was at a conference in Battle Creek in 1856. Getting ready for the conference was quite exciting, and there's a story that comes with it. I read from Ella Robinson's Stories of My Grandmother, as she describes how the folks were preparing as the visitors were going to be coming to Battle Creek. James and Ellen White lived in a small house with their 3 little boys and their 2 faithful helpers, Clarissa Bonfoy and Jenny Fraser. On that particular afternoon, everyone was bustling around getting ready to entertain the guests who were expected the next day. The women were cleaning house, Henry and Edson were raking the yard, and baby Willie, now 22 months old, was playing about, getting in everybody's way, and enjoying the excitement as much as his older brothers. The rough board kitchen floor had been scrubbed, and a tub of dirty suds was left sitting in the middle of the room. As Jenny passed by on her way to gather chips for starting the cook stove fire, she noticed the baby standing beside the tub. "What are you doing, Willie?" she asked. Sticky boat, chirped the little fellow, pushing a small wooden pail around in the water with a stick. Coming back up the steps a few minutes later, Jenny thought of the baby. Where was he? She hurried into the kitchen, where she heard a gurgling sound. A tiny foot was sticking out of the water. She snatched and pulled the baby out and ran screaming to find his mother. "Willie's drowned! He's drowned! He's drowned!" she shrieked. Mrs. White came running from the front room and met her in the doorway. "Jenny, was the water hot or cold?" "He's drowned! He's drowned! He's dead! He's dead!" the girl kept screaming. Mrs. White seized Jenny by the shoulder, shaking her vigorously, asked, "Jenny Fraser, tell me, was the water hot or cold?" "Cold!" gasped the terrified Jenny. "Then give the child to me. You send for the doctor and call James. Run for the doctor! Run for the doctor!" the girl shouted to a young man standing nearby. He began to run. Jenny followed, slapping him on the back and shoulders and shouting, "Run! Run! Run!" By this time, Mrs. White was in the front yard with Willie. Using a pair of scissors she had snatched up as she ran, she cut away his clothes. As she rolled him over and over on the ground, quantities of dirty water poured from his nose and mouth. She continued rolling the little body. James White arrived and stood silently praying and watching as the minutes ticked by. Ellen lifted Willie and looked for signs of life. There was none. She laid him down and rolled him again. More water trickled from his mouth. Neighbors gathered and stood with sad, pitying faces, watching the mother's efforts. 15 minutes passed, and still Willie's condition was apparently hopeless. "How dreadful to see her handling that dead child," said one woman. "Somebody take that dead baby away from her." "You let her have her baby," retorted James White with unusual emphasis. "She knows what she's about." 20 agonizing minutes passed, during which Mrs. White saw no signs of life. She lifted the limp form and held his cheeks against hers. She kissed the cold lips. What did she see? A flicker of an eyelid, a slight pucker of his lips. "I believe he's trying to return my kiss," she cried. "There must be life. There is life. There is life." She carried the limp form into the house. "Jenny, quick, bring some cloths and heat them." Ellen wrapped the hot cloths around Willie's cold body, changing them frequently. She held him up again close to her face. "He's breathing. He's breathing. My baby's alive." And she hugged him to her. Thank God, she said over and over again. Tears of joy ran down her cheeks. Well, that was in preparation for this meeting. And little Willie did survive, so that we can see this family portrait. So what was the vision itself about? Well, described as the two ways vision, it described the way of life and the way of death, and went into particulars about some of the things that were taking place in the lives of believers. Ellen White entitled one section, "Conformity to the World." And she described ways in which people were being squeezed into the world's mold, as Paul described, and that they should cut loose from those influences. She talked about their use of hours pursuing the fashions of the world rather than pursuing godliness. And she talked about the wives of the ministers. This is all part of this same vision. And she said that God would have a people that were separate from the world to make those choices, to be followers of Jesus Christ and his humility. So then, when in the context of those choices they were to make, she had this particular glimpse of the conference participants, and then the angel made this declaration.
Some food for worms, some subjects of the 7 last plagues, Some will be alive and remain upon the earth to be translated at the coming of Jesus.
The testimony was about choices, going one way or another, and that within the people that would be on the earth, some would be food for worms, certainly, but for those that were alive, there were two choices: either to be a participant in the plagues because of rejecting God's guidance, or to be alive and wait for Jesus to come. Now, that was the purpose, but many took it to mean that it was an announcement that within the lifetime of those that were there, that Jesus would return. No different than the statement of Jesus in Matthew 16. And both Paul and John include statements in their letters or in John's revelation that would indicate that they believed that Jesus would come within their lifetime. Paul said, "We that are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord." That certainly sounds like he thought it was in his lifetime. And John wrote that, "Surely come, Lord Jesus." And there were disciples that were asking about whether John would be alive until Jesus would return. And he had to give them a conditional interpretation of that statement. So it has always been the belief that people would be alive that receive these messages, either in the lifetime of Jesus or in the lifetime of Ellen White. But the return of Christ is conditional. Jesus said, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." So there are a lot of prophecies that talk about the conflict at the end, but the real holdup is whether the gospel is being spread. And that's for you and for me. We need to prepare for that. Some of us will be laid to rest, and we will be, as the vision says, food for worms, but we will be resting until Jesus comes. The part of the vision having to do with the food for worms prepared the whites for the loss, untimely loss, of Clarissa Bonfoy, who, but 35 years of age, passed away just days after this vision. And those of us who are alive will be having that choice, one way or the other, for life or for death. Jesus wants us to choose life. I hope these thoughts have been helpful to you as we consider the most momentous decision that we have to make, that is, for Jesus today. God bless you. See you next time.